welcome, and hope you all are doing well, at least better than me. I am having to drink a lot of lemon juice because kind of a strange holistic assessment of my health. I've done this a few times. Whenever there's a smog alert, I get very congested and can cause challenges. So just trying to be healthy. Okay. So starting out with social work and social justice video. And there's quite a few. So we're on chapter 6 and some of the social justice lens for privilege, oppression, and diversity here is what they're asking us to do.
Social justice is how I view the world. It's part of who I am, not just part of what I do. I feel like when it relates to social justice, the importance of fighting for equality for everyone and ensuring that everyone's voice is heard.
Using a social justice lens in my work really looks at what is happening in the community at this very moment. What are some of the trends that are occurring? What are some of the political issues that are present? And how does that impact the people that live, work, and play there? And what does that look like for all of us? And what things can I do to support people in having access to the things that they need to be able to live, work, and play in the best way possible that really meets their full potential? So that's how I look at it. And so it looks very differently depending on who you're working with, but it's about how do we support people in meeting their full potential by addressing any barriers that are in the way of that.
So for me, when we talk about a social justice lens, what I really reflect on is being mindful of the unique experiences of others. In my clinical practice, I've seen that there is so many barriers that prior to being in my field placement, I wouldn't have been able to identify. So really thinking about that particular client and their unique experience and kind of stepping outside of myself for a moment to really focus on them and understanding that our lives are very different and helping them based on where they're at with what resources that they have.
Using a social justice lens in my work means constantly reflecting on myself and always thinking about what identities are in the room and in the environment and what I can do to not demean, but support.
Using a social justice lens in my work means advocating for transgender youth in schools, with families, educating them on the needs of their children. It also means fighting for the injustices that many transgender people face in this country, especially now with all the anti-transgender legislation that's trying to be passed around the country. Social justice means defeating those types of bills and measures and standing up and helping fight for equity and equality in healthcare and access to that healthcare, and also in housing and in jobs. It's a very encompassing thing, and it's always going to be a part of our job as social workers.
Power doesn't give up power. We need to work together to change the structures that are unjust. My social work lens, specifically looking at social justice, needs to come into play when I interact with people, with family systems, with communities, because unless we change the policies and structures that oppress people, we'll have the same battle. And it's not because we don't have intelligent, hardworking families. We have structures that hold people in economic and social inequalities.
This is not just a surface level problem. It's not just a one-dimensional problem, but that there are multiple systems working together, either to help someone or to hurt someone even unintentionally. And so if you're approaching it, to me, from a social justice perspective, you have to be willing to dig into those layers and understand the dimensionality, the different dimensions that kind of bring a problem into existence, and how do you peel back those layers to find solutions.
I think using a social justice lens in my work is the ability to look at something and recognize the privileges that you bring to the table. So I think that just as a society, we're very hesitant to talk about privileges that we have. We're afraid that people, if we own those or if we discuss those, that people are going to think that we shouldn't be included in the conversation, if that makes sense. But so I work at a treatment center in Detroit, and 94% of my clientele are African American women, mostly that are homeless. And I think coming to that work with a social justice lens is understanding that although I'm there and I want to do this work and I want to be a support system for them, I will never know what it feels like to be an African American woman in the city of Detroit. I will never know what it feels like to be a homeless African American in the city of Detroit. But further than that, right? So like if you look at socioeconomic status or your gender, or your sexual preference, I just owning those things and recognizing that I'm constantly in a learner's role. And just because I'm the clinician and I have a client sitting in front of me, some of like the most incredible life lessons that I've learned were from clients and not the other way around. So I just really force myself to try to continuously analyze what's happening in this conversation. What type of privileges do I bring? What type of oppression have people been through that I haven't lived through myself? And what type of different life experiences have they gone through that I need to be aware of and recognize and talk about in order for it to be a holistic treatment experience?
That is University of Michigan and the work that they do on social justice. And it flows right into our chapter and how this looks when we get into social justice. So here is the chapter I wanted to get into, you guys. PowerPoint 6, social work and social justice. So a lot of society accords every societal member the same basic rights, the same opportunities, and then benefits. So right now, the monetary system is one of the places we're seeing a lot of injustice and issues, lending, borrowing, things of that nature. So the social worker's role is to work for a just society with human rights. These are rights inherent by virtue of being human. We're asked to protect life, to also ensure freedom, and to secure personal liberty. Some of the categories of human rights, we have civil and political rights. We've also got social and economic rights, and then these collective rights. So as you go through the chapter, you'll be informed on a lot of these and see what we're working for as a social worker. So with the right to social welfare, we have economic and social and cultural rights. That's a lot of the stuff lately I've been saying. Interest rates have been at zero for about 10 years, and the Federal Reserve has slowly raised them because of the inflation. This is how they fight inflation. The problem being it might be too little too late. So we're already seeing year over year, like 8.6% increase in costs, which is hard. So most of us at our jobs get a 2 or 3% raise if we're lucky. I remember jobs given a 1% raise and people being grateful for that. So there is a right to work, a right to standard of living that supports adequate health care and well-being, and then a right to education. So we have definitely been working for all of those in America. Some would say we've gotten close, and many would say we are really just so far away. And so as we go into deeper in chapter 6, the social justice isms, there's a few they list on here, starting with racism, elitism, sexism, heterosexism, and there's ageism, handicapism, and others like, now they call handicapism ableism. So some of the things that you see, luckily a few of those were combated with the Disabilities Act of 1990. There are some ageism laws on the book, even some sexism laws, but we still have a long way to go. So here it defines the isms. Racism is the ideology that perpetrates the social domination of one racial group by another. And then there's also the prejudice against those in lower economic classes. That's considered elitism. We see a lot of that going on today. Sexism is the belief that one sex is superior to the other, and heterosexism is prejudice against people whose sexual orientation differs from that of heterosexuals. Then they finish up there with ageism, and that's the belief that one age group is inferior to another. And then there is handicapism, and that's prejudice against people who have mental or physical disabilities. There's also another video on Geraldo Rivera and disability. He kind of brought this to light in the 70s. And a few videos came out on it. He definitely found the PA system. With investigative reporting. So he went into Staten Island and kind of videoed some of the stuff that was going on in order to help change what was going on there at Willowbrook. And this was, a good 50 years ago, but they have a few
Chicken fries are back on the 2 for $5 Nixon match at Burger King.
Advertisement
Want them as a
first,
side? Duh.
just in case you were hungry. But, it comes down to that. Some of them weren't given food or fed well. They were kind of given slop. He documents that, the living conditions. It was rough.
Eyewitness News, WABC TV, Channel 7, is in its 53rd year, the premier local news brand in the nation. And the bond we have with you, our viewers, is something profound. Thanks to the stories we've reported on TV and online. Trying to rank them becomes the kind of endeavor that's like the debate over who's the best baseball player ever. You can't answer that. But certainly, one of the most important, if not the most important series we have ever done is our investigation into the institution on Staten Island for people with disabilities known as Willowbrook. I say institution with no small degree of hesitancy because it was a warehouse for human beings who had disabilities, a wretched, filthy place, covered in inhumanity. Geraldo Rivera, one of the most iconic reporters in TV news history, broke those stories after doctors there, disgusted by what they were seeing, led him inside to tell the world what was really going on inside Willowbrook. 50 years ago, right now, Geraldo and Eyewitness News broke the Willowbrook scandal. And it changed the way this country would treat people with disabilities forever and for the better, including how we referred to people with disabilities back then. The R word. You're going to hear that several times in what you're about to see. I talked to Geraldo recently about Willowbrook and what it meant for him, for Eyewitness News, and most importantly, for all those people with disabilities around the country.
Children, lying on the floor naked and smeared with their own feces, they were making a pitiful sound, the kind of mournful wail that it's impossible for me to forget. This is what it looked like, this is what it sounded like, but how can I tell you about the way it smelled? It smelled of filth, it smelled of disease, and it smelled of death.
50 years ago this year, right now, Geraldo Rivera, as a reporter for WABC TV, Eyewitness News, Channel 7 in New York, changed the world, certainly changed the country, and changed this station. Geraldo, thank you for joining us to talk about this monumental anniversary. And people who have not heard the word Willowbrook on Staten Island, tell me what Willowbrook was and what you did.
You know, Willowbrook was something, it was one of those seminal events. I never planned it. I had no anticipation of it. I had no connection with developmental disabilities.
I first heard of this big place with a pretty sounding name because of a call I received from a member of the Willowbrook staff, Dr. Michael Wilkins. The doctor told me he'd just been fired because he'd been urging parents with children in one of the buildings, building number 6, to organize so they could more effectively demand improved conditions for their children. The doctor invited me to see the conditions he was talking about, so unannounced and unexpected by the school administration, we toured building number 6. The doctor had warned me that it would be bad. It was horrible. There was one attendant for perhaps 50 severely and profoundly retarded children.
I just had a couple of doctors who were, activists who I had worked with on a couple of exposés before this. They said, you have to see this. It's horrible the way they are treating these youngsters. Most of them were kids, teenagers. And I heard the recounting from the doctors how horrible it was. I did not believe it because I had no experience. And then they got me a key and we went into the place and ran across. I have an indelible impression, Bill, of running across that meadow and using the purloined key to get inside and then opening the door and then suddenly seeing hell on earth. The first you smell it and then the sounds and I could weep right now just recounting it.
The ones that we saw were the most severely and profoundly retarded. There are thousands there like that, not going to school, sitting on the ward all day, not being talked to by anyone, only 1 or 2 or 3 people to take care of 70 people on the ward, sharing the same toilet, contracting the same diseases together. 100% of patients at Willowbrook contract hepatitis within 6 months of being in the institution. For these people, life is just 1 hour after another of looking at the floor. There's no training around here.
Can the children be trained?
Yes, every child can be trained. These kids, there's no effort. We don't know what these kids are capable of doing.
In the documentary that you did on Willowbrook, which was a place where young disabled children and young adults were warehoused. That's what they were. They were warehoused there. It smelled of filth, of disease, and of death. And you went in there, the doctor's blessings, who were running that, who were appalled by the conditions. And when you put this whole thing together, and I want to talk about all that, but when you put it together, the ramifications of this were huge because it changed the way this country, the country, looks at how it treats kids with disabilities.
I'm Congressman Biaggi. How are you? Why are these patients on the floor?
We don't have enough clothing. We don't have the proper help to keep clothing on them. We have a few nudists that will not keep clothes on. They will pull them off. But most of all, we don't have the help to keep the kids properly fed.
We're talking about more money for the institution.
Well, that we could use because then we will have more help.
It may be the most important story. I think it is the most important story this station has ever done. We've done a lot of important stories, but nothing had a bigger change than what you did.
Well, Bill, it's such a big part of my life, the relationships forged out of that cauldron. It was something that to this day I have people saying, I studied sociology in college and they showed the Channel 7 documentary, The Last Great Disgrace. I had an old auntie there. I had an uncle there. I had my sibling was there. And people, New Yorkers and others across the country come to me and say how important this was to open people's eyes to the suffering and the warehousing, to use that word, which is absolutely accurate, and the utter disregard for the humanity of these youngsters. It's something that's scarred me forever. It changed my life forever. I'm so proud of it. I hope it's on my tombstone rather than he opened Al Capone's vault or he got his nose broken in a brawl with the skinheads. This is something that's so important to me. It is, part of who I am. And, the fact that eyewitnesses, the way they stayed with me and everyone came after us. The New York State, the government, from the governor on down to the Department of Mental Health, everybody said, don't air that, we're gonna sue you, violating privacy, trespass, this, that, and the other thing. We put it on, the reaction was absolutely nuclear.
You think what we showed on television in the past week is an accurate reflection of the problem of the situation?
I think it focused and made vivid the problems at Willowbrook.
It was an honest portrayal.
I think it was an honest portrayal of the problems at their worst. It may not tell the whole story of Willowbrook, and it certainly doesn't tell the whole story of the retarded, but it does describe unmistakably the kind of problems that we've seen, and now thanks to the coverage, many people have seen.
The attendants are trying their best, but the staff is just too small to do anything more than just try and keep the place clean. When there's only one person to take care of 30 or 40, nothing good can possibly happen. No rehabilitation, no training, nothing. The attendants are as much the victim of the conditions here as the patients are. And this visit has reminded me of something else Dr. Miller told me. He said, now that society has moved to clean up the lunatic asylums, the prisons, and the hospitals, the way we care for our mentally retarded is the last great disgrace.
People were so outraged that this could be happening, and here, the world's largest facility for this population in New York City, and they're treated worse than animals in kennels. Bill, it was something that it's hard for people 50 years later to even get their arms around. Bill.
I think about that in the mid to late 70s, there was new legislation passed for rights for disabled people and accessibility, and that would have not have happened. Really, you started the whole thing, and I know I work with a disabled rights group and a group that serves the people of this city and the area, the tri-state, who have disabilities, and everyone always points to Geraldo Rivera's investigation into Willowbrook, and it really did change the way we look at disabled people. Geraldo, and I do think, you were mocking yourself and being self-deprecating, and it's funny, Al Capone and everything, but it is true. This was real big-time journalism, and it wasn't just on Channel 7 Eyewitness News. You also were a correspondent at 2020, and you had it on 2020 as well, and it was moving.
The key to this expose, aside from the shock and the outrage of seeing the way the population was being handled, was that there was a solution to this.
When we come back, the solution Geraldo uncovered by showing where it did work. When we return.
A real-life horror story of lack of attention, of filth, and of children living as animals live in uncivilized and human existence. But our attention is not just to horrify, but also to demonstrate that it doesn't have to be that way. Public pressure can apparently force change in California as well as it does here in New York. They had a system that resembled ours until 1965. That was when a prominent European expert on retardation said something that was widely publicized. After touring the California facilities, he said, "My God, you don't care for your mentally retarded children as well as we in Europe care for our cattle." The remark eventually caused them to dramatically restructure their approach. The heart and soul of the California system is now no longer the large state institutions. It's the regional center. Children's Hospital is one of the 13 centers in the state. Various programs are administered in neighborhoods all over Los Angeles County and San Fernando Valley from here. Sub-offices provide whatever services a family with a retarded child needs, be it a daycare center, a sheltered workshop, or medical care. The idea is to shift the care and training of the retarded to their own communities. In other words, to help the parents keep their children in childhood.
And I think your priorities are mixed up in New York in terms of serving the retarded. Your top investment is in institutions. Our top investment is in the Department of Education and providing a program for the child while he's at home.
The key to this expose, aside from the shock and the outrage of seeing the way the population was being handled, was that there was a solution to this. It wasn't to put them in big institutions. It was to take this population and give them facilities and community-based residences where 3 or 4 or 5 could live together with one-to-one care, with attention, where their humanity could be maximized. I remember the first time we opened the first home, we have 50 of them now. The first home we opened was in Little Neck, and the neighbors were, really, really, not in my neighborhood. You can't put that here. I don't want this population. And then when they learned that
So I wanted to get through half of that for you guys today, because I know it's about 25 minutes, and getting into the ableism and disabilities, because that is a big deal. That's some of the stuff that we work with. That was one of my social work jobs. You could look those up at LADD is Living Assistance for the Developmentally Delayed, or the REM, I think that stood for Robert E. Miller. They connected with Ohio Mentor. There's several all over the country. Before social workers, religious folks took up the fight. So the basis of social injustice is social Darwinism. That came up with sociological theories of structural functionalism and then conflict theories. Some of the other is psychological theories, maybe even victim blaming and just world beliefs. So some of the effects of social injustice is oppression through discrimination. Also, dehumanization, as you saw in that video, they kind of were dehumanized there. And that was, pretty sad to look at some of those, because you would think folks would be treated better than that. You would think, they would have that basic right to life. I'll show you a video on Friday that almost juxtaposed what they do at this place 50 years later today. And it's LADD, Living Assistance for Developmentally Delayed. They may have since changed their name, but just ideas there, how they changed it from victimization and whatnot. Also, getting further into oppression, dehumanization, and victimization on Friday. So oppressions resulting from an imbalance of power between the identified majority population and groups with minority status. Also, oppression denies minority groups access to opportunities and resources and limits their rightful participation in society. Also, by regarding others, and dehumanization, by regarding others with cold detachment and showing indifference to human misery, dehumanization obscures the inherent worth and dignity of personhood. Again, you saw that in the videos. They were fed slop. They all had to use the same toilet. It sped up the spread of hepatitis. Last one is victimization. So ascribing blame and victim status confers perceptions of hopelessness, powerlessness, and alienation. So wanted to go over that more, and the mandate for social justice to ensure access to resources for everyone and respecting diversity. So that will be Friday, finishing up chapter 6. That'll get us closer to halfway through the book, because we are at the halfway point of the semester. So be sure to get your papers in. I will keep it open so you can continue to turn them in. And always give you guys the chance to do these. That's the most important. So see you on Friday, and stay out of the heat. It definitely, so by taking, say, like Mucinex, because of the breathing problems and the smog alert, I got dehydrated, and now also I'm suffering a kidney stone. So you see the holistic approach to medicine, how it also affects the body. So I'm chugging lots of fluids, hopefully better by Friday. See you all then.